1967. Las Vegas. Backstage at Frank Sinatra's show. You hear it before you see it. The muffled roar of the crowd, a distant swing band, the dry clink of glasses. Then, sudden silence. And a voice. Calm. Certain. Dangerous. When the most powerful man in show business humiliates you publicly, you have two choices, the narrator says. Lower your eyes, or say something that changes everything. Johnny Cash stands in the shadows behind the curtain. Just seconds ago, through the speakers, Sinatra leaned into the microphone and smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have a special guest, Johnny Cash, the hillbilly who thinks he can sing. The room exploded with laughter. Johnny's fingers closed around a glass of bourbon. His hand shook, not with fear, but with rage held too tightly. In his pocket, temptation was close enough to feel. June Carter stood beside him, her face frozen, eyes locked on his. She knew this look. She knew what usually came next. One step forward, and he could disappear again. One swallow, and the night would blur like all the others. But something else was happening. Something quieter, more dangerous. Because the man laughing on that stage had no idea what he'd just triggered, and what Johnny Cash was about to do. No one in that room, least of all Frank Sinatra, was ready for it. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to go back 3 years. Let us know where you're watching from, and we hope you enjoy the story. The call came in February 1967, mid-morning, when the house was quiet enough that silence felt fragile. Johnny had been sober just over 3 months, the longest stretch he'd managed in years. His body still woke him at odd hours. His mind still looked for exits. But the pills were gone. The bottles, too. What remained was a nervous, deliberate clarity that made every decision feel heavier than it should. The voice on the line was polished, efficient, an assistant speaking on behalf of Frank Sinatra. An invitation to appear as a guest on Sinatra's show in Las Vegas. Prime time. The kind of platform that didn't just revive careers, it redefined them. Saul Holiff nearly shouted when Johnny told him. "This is it," he said. "You step onto that stage, and you're not just a country singer anymore. You cross over. You become untouchable." Johnny said nothing. He kept hearing the tone from the other end of the call. Not admiration, not curiosity. Something colder, measured. "Mr. Sinatra specifically requested you," the assistant had said. "He thinks it's time America saw what real versatility looks like." A week later, Las Vegas greeted him with neon confidence and dry desert air. The rehearsal hall was immaculate. Orchestra already seated, cameras being tested. Sinatra, however, was absent. Instead, an assistant delivered instructions like items on a checklist. "Ring of Fire first," he said, "then a duet. That's life." Johnny blinked. "That's life?" "Yes," the man replied, not looking up. Mr. Sinatra thought it would be educational. Johnny knew swing. He respected it. But it wasn't his language. His songs lived lower, closer to the ground. He asked if Sinatra would be joining rehearsal. The assistant shook his head. "Mr. Sinatra prefers surprises." June arrived the next day. She took one look at Johnny and knew something was wrong. Not fear, focus. The kind that meant he was bracing for impact. "Why would Sinatra want you singing his song?" she asked. "That's not collaboration. That's control." They were walking the hotel corridor when voices drifted from an open service door. 2 men from Sinatra's team, unaware they were being heard. "Frank's gonna tear him apart tomorrow," one said, amused. "Which joke?" the other asked. "The hillbilly one. Always kills." June stopped cold. She didn't hesitate. "We're leaving. Now." Johnny didn't move. He stared down the hall like he was measuring distance, not space. "No," he said finally. "I'm going out there." That night, alone in his room, he unfolded a worn scrap of paper June had given him months earlier. Notes from scripture. Simple lines. Not promises. Anchors. He knew it was a trap. He knew he might be humiliated in front of millions. But something deeper than pride held him in place. A refusal to step back into hiding. Near midnight, he called his mother. "Why are you really doing this?" Carrie asked after he explained. Johnny took a long breath. "Because I've been running my whole life. From the farm, from the way I talk, from where I come from. Sinatra represents everyone who ever looked at people like us and saw less. I can't run anymore." There was a pause. Then don't run, son. Stand." He hung up, knowing that standing would cost more than he was prepared to pay. At 6 in the evening, Johnny Cash found his dressing room by following a corridor most people didn't use. The carpet thinned as he walked. The lights dimmed. When he stopped, he knew he was in the right place because there was no name on the door. Just a strip of tape with one word written in marker. Guest. Inside, the room barely fit a chair and a mirror. Somewhere beyond the wall, Sinatra's suite stretched wide enough to host a party. A costumer arrived 10 minutes later with a garment bag and an apologetic half-smile. The tuxedo inside was powder blue, stiff, and clearly too small across the shoulders. "Mr. Sinatra's team selected this," the man said, avoiding eye contact. "They thought it would fit the aesthetic." Johnny didn't touch it. June did. She ran 2 fingers along the sleeve, then looked up at him. "This isn't an accident," she said. "This is intentional." At 7:30, Johnny headed toward the stage for final sound check. The hallway was suddenly crowded. Laughter rolled toward him, sharp with alcohol. Sinatra appeared with Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., surrounded by handlers like planets orbiting a sun. "Johnny!" Sinatra boomed, arms open. "Ready for the big night?" Before Johnny could answer, Dean leaned in, already unsteady. "Frank," he laughed, "you really got him singing your song? That's like asking a mule to run the Kentucky Derby." The laugh landed hard. Sammy didn't join in. He looked at Johnny, then away. Sinatra waved a dismissive hand. "Dean's had too much. But Johnny," his eyes narrowed just enough, "you're comfortable with that's life, right? It's different from barn dances." Johnny felt his jaw tighten. He counted his breath. "I'll manage." At 8 sharp, he stepped onto the empty stage. The microphone crackled. Too sharp, too thin. He adjusted his distance. It didn't help. A sound engineer leaned over the board, pretended to fix it. Johnny heard him murmur to another tech, "Leave it! Frank's orders!" From the darkened seats, June watched Johnny's fingers clamp around the guitar neck until the knuckles went pale. 10 minutes before airtime, an assistant found him in the wings. "One more thing," the man said, rehearsed politeness barely masking discomfort. "Mr. Sinatra will introduce you. Just be prepared for his humor." "What's he going to say?" Johnny asked. The assistant swallowed. "It's show business. Don't take it personal." June stepped closer. "We can still walk." Johnny didn't answer. He could hear Sinatra's voice now, warming the crowd. Confident. Effortless. Then the moment came. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sinatra announced to a full house of over 2,000. "Tonight we have a very special guest. He's come all the way from, well, somewhere with dirt roads and banjos. Johnny Cash, the hillbilly who thinks he can sing." Laughter erupted. Loud. Sustained. Backstage, someone had placed a glass of bourbon in Johnny's hand. His arm shook. June grabbed his shoulder. and forced him to face her. "Look at me," she said. "You're not that man anymore." He set the glass down untouched. When he stepped into the light, the noise followed him, but something inside had gone quiet. Johnny Cash stepped into the spotlight and did nothing. Applause rippled, uneven and uncertain, laughter still leaking from Sinatra's joke, but Johnny didn't reach for the guitar. He stood at the microphone, shoulders squared, eyes forward. 5 seconds passed. 10. 15. The room began to shift. People coughed, chairs creaked. The silence grew heavy enough to feel deliberate. The cameras pushed in. A bead of sweat traced a slow line down his temple. His face stayed calm, almost detached. "Evening, folks," he said, not into the microphone, but just past it, voice low and unamplified. A sound engineer scrambled, boosting levels too late. Johnny lifted the guitar then, settled it against his chest, and struck the opening chords of Ring of Fire. But not the version they knew. The tempo crawled. Each note hung in the air, stretched thin, stripped of celebration. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Sinatra, watching from the side, frowned. This wasn't defiance. It was control. When Johnny reached the chorus, something changed. His voice rose, raw and thunderous, dragging the song out of nostalgia and into confession. The horns were gone. The humor vanished. A woman near the front pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes wet. Sammy Davis Jr., standing in the wings, whispered to no one, "He's not performing. He's bleeding." The applause that followed was real. Shorter, heavier. Sinatra strode back on stage, smile fixed. "Wonderful, Johnny," he said, clapping once. "Now let's show these folks how a real singer handles That's Life." The orchestra swung in, bright and polished. Johnny didn't sing. He looked at Sinatra. Let the band play. Let the joke hang. "Come on," Sinatra prodded, edge creeping in. "Don't be shy." The laughter that answered was thin, uncomfortable. Johnny waited 3 beats, then stepped closer to the microphone. "You're right, Mr. Sinatra," he said evenly. "I am a hillbilly. My daddy picked cotton for 15 cents a day. My brother died when I was 12, cut in half by a saw. I've been arrested. I've been so high I couldn't remember my own name. And I can't sing like you." The room froze. "But I can look people in the eye and tell them the truth. I don't sing about life from a penthouse. I sing it from the gutter I crawled out of. And maybe that's why they listen." He turned to the band. "Can you play something simpler? 3 chords." The conductor hesitated, glanced at Sinatra. After a long breath, Sinatra nodded. Johnny began Folsom Prison Blues alone. No swing, no polish, just steel strings and a voice that carried weight. "I hear the train a-comin'." Servers stopped moving. Dean Martin's grin faded. A man in the audience, older, stiff-backed, stood without realizing it. By the final line, the entire room was on its feet. Not cheering. Witnessing. Johnny set the guitar down, crossed the stage, and offered Sinatra his hand. 3 seconds passed. Sinatra took it. Johnny walked off stage to an ovation that followed him into the dark. June wrapped him in her arms. He didn't smile. He looked emptied out, like someone who had said the last true thing he had. And somewhere behind him, Frank Sinatra stood very still, realizing he'd just lost control of his own stage. The door to Johnny's dressing room hadn't even closed when Saul Holiff stormed in. His face was pale, jaw tight, eyes blazing with a kind of fear Johnny recognized from bad motel nights. "What the hell did you just do?" Saul snapped. "Do you have any idea who you embarrassed on live television?" June stepped between them without raising her voice. "He told the truth." Saul laughed once, sharp and humorless. Truth doesn't matter in this town. Frank Sinatra owns Vegas. He owns favors. He owns people. You don't humiliate a man like that and walk away. Before Johnny could answer, there was a knock. Not loud. Precise. Sammy Davis, Jr. stepped inside and quietly closed the door behind him. For a moment, no one spoke. Sammy looked at Johnny, really looked at him. "What you did out there," he said slowly, "that took guts. Real ones." Then his tone shifted. "But Frank doesn't forget. Ever. And some of his friends, they don't play by television rules." June stiffened. "Is that a threat?" Sammy shook his head. "No. It's advice. Leave Vegas tonight. Don't wait till morning." When he left, the room felt smaller. By 1:30 a.m., Johnny and June were packing in silence. Johnny kept glancing at the window, half expecting headlights that wouldn't pass. June tried to steady the moment, but the air felt wired. The phone rang. Once, twice, 5 times. Johnny picked up. A low voice answered, "Mr. Cash, there's a black Cadillac outside. Mr. Sinatra wants to talk." June whispered, "Don't." Johnny closed his eyes. "If I run now," he said quietly, "I'll run forever." The drive took them past the glow of the Strip and into empty desert. No conversation, just road and darkness. The car stopped at a nearly abandoned diner, neon flickering like it might give up at any second. Inside, Sinatra sat alone. No entourage, no smile, just coffee and a cigarette burning down between his fingers. "Sit," he said. Johnny did. For a long time, Sinatra stared at the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. "You know what the worst part was? Not the embarrassment. Not that you made me look like an asshole on my own show." He exhaled. "It's that you were right." Johnny didn't respond. He couldn't. "I built a kingdom," Sinatra continued. "Power, fear, respect. Somewhere along the way, I forgot why I sang in the first place." His hand trembled as he lifted the cigarette. "You walked onto my stage and reminded everyone what real looks like. I hated you for it." June spoke softly. "So, why are we here?" Sinatra met her eyes. "Because I could destroy him. One call. And I won't." He stood, tossing cash on the table. "If I do, I prove him right." He paused at the door. "Don't come back to Vegas for a while." "Not because I'll hurt you. Because every time I see you, I'll remember a man with nothing left who still stood up." When the door closed, Johnny sat motionless. June finally asked, "What just happened?" Johnny stared at the empty booth. "I think," he said, "I just saw a powerful man realize he's alone." The phone started ringing at 6:47 a.m., sharp enough to slice through the little sleep they'd managed. Johnny reached for it blindly, still half in the desert diner, half in the glow of stage lights. "Turn on the TV," Saul Holiff said, breathless. "Channel 7, now." The screen flickered to life. A freeze frame of Johnny on stage, eyes steady, mouth mid-sentence. "Country singer stuns Sinatra on live TV," the headline read. The clip rolled. "I sing it from the gutter I crawled out of." June's hand tightened around Johnny's. Pride was there, unmistakable. But so was fear. By noon, the phone never stopped. Not agents, not executives, people. A coal miner from West Virginia, voice rough as gravel. "You said what I've felt my whole life." A Vietnam veteran calling from a hospital ward. "You reminded me what I was fighting for." A woman from Mississippi, crying quietly. "My son's an addict. When you talked about your demons," he cried. "First time in 2 years." Johnny listened, stunned, saying little. He hadn't meant to become anything. He'd only meant not to lie. On the second day, another call came. This one calculated, controlled. Columbia Records. Clive Davis, himself. "We want to record a live album," Davis said. "In prison." Johnny laughed once, unsure he'd heard correctly. "I'm not an activist." "You don't have to be," Davis replied. "You sang truth. People want more of that. Raw. Unfiltered." When Johnny hung up, he stared at the wall. "I didn't ask for this." June met his eyes. "No one asks to be a symbol. It just happens." 4 days later, the mail arrived in stacks. Most of it blurred together until Johnny noticed a small envelope. Uneven handwriting. A 14-year-old boy from Tennessee. He read it aloud, voice breaking on the word worse. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his jacket. "I have to do the prison concert," he said. On the 6th night, the phone rang again. Late. Johnny answered alone. "Cash," Frank Sinatra said. "I saw the news. You're everywhere." A pause. "Do the prison show, and sing like you did on my stage. Not for me. For them." Johnny waited for irony. It never came. The next evening, Johnny and June stood on the hotel balcony. Desert sky burning red. "What if I can't live up to what they think I am?" he asked. June turned him toward her. "You're not giving them perfection. You're giving them permission to survive." The following morning, Johnny called Columbia back. "I'll do Folsom," he said, "but no scripts, no safety net." There was silence on the line. Then, "You're insane." Johnny smiled faintly. "Maybe. But this time, I know why." At 5:30 a.m., January 13th, 1968, Johnny Cash sat in a motel chair outside Sacramento and watched an unopened bottle like it was a living thing. The cap glinted in the weak light. His hands didn't reach for it, but his mind circled it, slow and dangerous. For a second, he was back in 1965, staring at a mirror in a cheap room, eyes empty, pulse racing for the next swallow, the next pill. June walked in, saw the bottle, and didn't scold. She sat beside him, close enough that her shoulder touched his. "What if Vegas was just a performance?" he whispered. "What if I'm still that guy?" "Then today you'll find out," she said. By 8, their car rolled toward the walls of Folsom. Tall, gray, unforgiving, guard towers cutting into the sky. At the gate, an officer looked Johnny over with blunt skepticism. "Prisoner's been talking about you for weeks," he said. "Don't disappoint him." Then his voice dropped. "My brother's in there. 20 years. Your music. It keeps him steady. Please, give him something real." Inside, the air changed. Disinfectant, steel, old sweat. The sound of doors locking carried its own authority. Before the show, the administration let Johnny walk a corridor lined with cells. Faces appeared at bars, eyes hard with judgment. A man about 55 called out, "Cash, you ever been in the gutter for real?" Johnny stopped. "Yeah," he said. "I have." The prisoner stepped closer. "Then you know what it's like when folks look at you like you're already dead." His voice tightened. "Don't lie to us today. We can smell it a mile away. If you're here for publicity, get out now. But if you remember cages, even without bars, sing like you meant it." Johnny nodded once, as if accepting a contract. 5 minutes before he walked on, producer Bob Johnston tried to keep things neat. "Remember," he warned, "Columbia wants this usable, radio-friendly." Johnny stared at the set list, then crossed out 3 songs. He wrote in one with a heavy stroke, "Cocaine Blues." "We can't air," Johnston began. "Then don't," Johnny cut in, "but I'm singing it." When he stepped into the prison dining hall, 2,000 men erupted. Not polite applause, an unleashed roar. Hands slammed tables. Shouts ricocheted off concrete. Some men laughed like they couldn't stop. Others cried without hiding it. Johnny waited until the noise thinned, then leaned into the microphone. "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash." The reaction hit again, louder, desperate. He held up a hand, asking for space, and it came, slowly, like a storm easing. "I know most of you are here because you made bad choices," he said. "So did I. Difference is, my cage was pills and bottles, not bars. But a cage is a cage. Today we're going to remember what it feels like to be free, if it's only for an hour." He began Folsom Prison Blues. The first line rolled out, and the room transformed. Men mouthed every word. One young inmate folded forward and sobbed into his arms. In a corner, a guard blinked hard and looked away. When Johnny reached, "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die," the hall went silent for a beat. Then the sound returned, heavier, like acknowledgement instead of entertainment. Later he announced Cocaine Blues. Even the band stiffened. Johnston muttered behind the equipment, "He's killing his career." Halfway through, Johnny stopped playing. The sudden quiet was terrifying. "I've sung this 100 times," he said, voice plain. "Never understood it till now. It's not about cocaine. It's the moment you realize you can't go back. That you became the man you swore you'd never be." He looked across the faces. "Question is, can you live with him in the mirror?" 2,000 men held their breath. "I couldn't," Johnny said. "Not for years. But standing here, maybe we can figure it out together." He finished the song, and the hall answered like thunder. For the last number, he brought out an inmate, Glenn Shirley, trembling with disbelief. "Sing your song," Johnny told him, handing over the guitar. "They need to hear it from you." Glenn sang Greystone Chapel, voice shaking, and grown men wept openly. Johnny stood behind him, head bowed, hands clasped, as if in prayer. After the show, walking the corridor again, Johnny stopped at the older prisoner's cell. "You did it," the man said softly. "You didn't lie." Johnny slid his hand through the bars. The prisoner gripped it. 10 seconds, maybe more. A guard turned his back and let it happen. 3 years later, 1971, Johnny played on a porch in Tennessee, June nearby, their small son humming along. A letter lay on the table. Glenn, now out, trying to build a life. The phone rang. June called. "It's for you." Johnny answered. "Hello." "Cash," Sinatra said. Older now, quieter. "I heard that convict's song on the radio. You gave him a chance." A pause stretched long. "I'm making a new record, and I want it different. No glamour, just truth. I forgot how." Johnny looked at June. She nodded once. "You never forgot," Johnny said gently. "You just stopped listening." Sinatra's voice tightened, almost breaking. "Will you help me?" "Yeah," Johnny said. "I will." When he hung up, June studied him. "After everything?" Johnny glanced toward the yard where his son played. "I remember what it's like," he said. "When someone gives you a second chance,